My name is Emily Parker, and 25 years ago I learned that the people who promise to stay forever are sometimes the first to leave when life becomes difficult. I was 28 years old when my son Noah was born. After a difficult pregnancy and an exhausting emergency C-section, I found myself lying in a hospital bed staring at the tiny baby sleeping beside me. The room was quiet, except for the soft beeping of medical equipment. Outside the window, rain tapped gently against the glass. I should have been overwhelmed with happiness, but instead I felt something I couldn't quite explain. A strange uneasiness had settled inside me long before Noah arrived. My husband, Michael Reed, had been acting differently for months. He came home later than usual. He spent more time staring at his phone than talking to me. Business trips suddenly became more frequent. Whenever I asked questions, he always had answers ready. Looking back, the signs were obvious. At the time, I blamed stress, work pressure, and the upcoming responsibility of becoming parents. 3 days after Noah was born, Michael finally came to visit. Most new fathers walk into hospital rooms carrying flowers, balloons, or gifts. Michael carried nothing, not even a smile. He stood near the doorway as if he were visiting a stranger rather than his wife and newborn son. I placed Noah in his arms and waited for some sign of affection. Instead, he stared at the baby for a few seconds before handing him back. "He's smaller than I expected," he said. I laughed nervously. "Most newborns are." Michael didn't laugh. At that moment, I should have understood something was wrong. Instead, I convinced myself he was nervous about becoming a father. A week later, I returned home. The apartment felt different, colder somehow. One afternoon, while I was sitting in the living room feeding Noah, Michael walked through the front door carrying a black leather briefcase. Without greeting me, he walked to the coffee table and placed a stack of documents in front of me. I glanced at the papers. Then I froze. Divorce petition. For several seconds, I genuinely thought I was misunderstanding what I was seeing. "What is this?" I asked. Michael sighed heavily. "It's time, Emily." I looked up at him. "Time for what?" "For us to end this." The room seemed to tilt around me. I stared at my husband, waiting for him to laugh and tell me this was some terrible joke. He never did. Instead, he calmly explained that he had fallen in love with another woman nearly a year earlier. Her name was Vanessa. She worked with a consulting firm that frequently partnered with his company. A year. He had been seeing her while I was pregnant, while I was decorating a nursery, while I was attending doctor appointments alone, while I was planning a future for our family. The betrayal hurt so deeply that breathing became difficult. Then I asked the question that mattered most. "What about Noah?" Michael's expression hardened. And then he said words that would stay with me for the next quarter century. "You and that baby are holding me back." I felt as though someone had punched me in the chest. I looked down at my son. His tiny fingers curled around the edge of a blanket. How could anyone look at a newborn child and see a burden? How could a father look at his own son and see an obstacle? Michael continued talking about freedom, opportunities, and the life he wanted with Vanessa. I barely heard any of it. A few months later, he left the country with her. He never called, he never wrote, he never sent birthday cards, and he never paid a single dollar of child support. That night, after learning he was gone for good, I sat beside Noah's crib and watched him sleep. The moon-shaped nightlight cast soft shadows across the room. I gently touched his tiny hand. "You are not a burden," I whispered. "You never will be." At the time, I had no idea that promise would shape both our lives. The years that followed were difficult. Some days, survival felt like an achievement. I worked long hours at an insurance office. Money was always tight. Every grocery trip required careful calculations. Every unexpected expense felt like a disaster waiting to happen. Yet somehow, Noah grew into the kind of child who made every sacrifice worthwhile. By age 10, teachers constantly praised his discipline. By 13, he had developed habits most adults struggled to maintain. By 16, he had already mapped out goals for his future. One night, I found him studying at nearly midnight. Books covered his desk. "You need sleep," I said. He smiled. "I need a future more." I sat beside him. "You don't have to carry all this responsibility." His expression softened. Somebody has too. Then he added quietly, I see how hard you work, Mom. Those words nearly broke my heart. For years I had tried to protect him from our struggles. Apparently, he had noticed everything. From that moment forward, Noah worked even harder. He earned scholarships, graduated near the top of his class, and eventually received admission into one of the most respected business schools in the country. The day we opened his acceptance letter, we both cried. Not because life had suddenly become easy, because for the first time, it felt possible. Neither of us realized that Noah's success was about to attract the attention of the one person who had abandoned him decades earlier. And when Michael Reed finally returned after 25 years, he wasn't coming back because he had found his conscience. He was coming back because he needed something. Something only the son he had abandoned could give him. For most of Noah's life, Michael Reed existed only as a name in old documents and faded memories. There were no phone calls on birthdays, no awkward holiday visits, no attempts to reconnect. As the years passed, his absence became normal. Noah stopped asking questions about him, and I stopped expecting anything. Life moved forward the way it always does. We built a future without him. By the time Noah graduated from college with honors, the man who had abandoned us felt more like a stranger than a father. After university, Noah accepted a position at a rapidly growing technology company. Unlike many young professionals who focused only on climbing the corporate ladder, Noah paid attention to problems other people ignored. He studied markets, analyzed business trends, and spent countless nights researching ideas. Within a few years, he launched a small consulting firm with 2 college friends. The business started modestly, operating from a tiny rented office above a bakery. Most people would have considered it a risky decision. Noah considered it an opportunity. The company grew faster than anyone expected. 1 client became 5, 5 became 20, 20 became hundreds. By the time Noah reached his early 30s, his firm had expanded across multiple states. Business magazines began publishing articles about the young entrepreneur who had built a successful company from almost nothing. Interviews followed. Awards followed. Investors followed. Every milestone filled me with pride, because I remembered the little boy who once worried about our utility bills and promised that one day he would take care of us. One evening, Noah invited me to dinner at an elegant restaurant overlooking the city skyline. As we sat near the window watching the lights sparkle across the buildings, he handed me a small envelope. "What is this?" I asked. "Open it." Inside was a deed. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then reality hit me. The house. A beautiful home in a quiet neighborhood with a large garden and a wraparound porch. "Mom," Noah said softly, "you spent 25 years making sacrifices for me. It's time someone did something for you." Tears immediately filled my eyes. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I thought about the apartment with the noisy air conditioner, the second jobs, the sleepless nights, the grocery store calculations. Every hardship suddenly felt worthwhile. What neither of us knew was that somewhere on the other side of the world, Michael Reed's life was unraveling. The glamorous future he had chosen over his family had not unfolded the way he imagined. His relationship with Vanessa eventually collapsed under the weight of constant arguments and financial pressure. The high-paying executive position that once seemed so promising disappeared after a series of poor business decisions. Several investments failed. One company he helped manage went bankrupt. Another became involved in legal disputes that damaged his professional reputation. By his late 50s, Michael was no longer the confident man who had walked away from his family decades earlier. He was divorced, financially unstable, and struggling to rebuild a career that had slowly fallen apart. One rainy evening, while searching online for potential business opportunities, Michael came across an article featuring. The headline immediately caught his attention. "Self-made entrepreneur expands national business network." Michael clicked the article. As he read, his expression changed. The successful businessman in the photographs carried his eyes, his smile, his features. For several seconds, he simply stared at the screen. Then he noticed the name, Noah Reed. His son, the child he had called a burden, The article described Noah's achievements, charitable projects, and rapidly growing business empire. By the time Michael finished reading, his hands were shaking. For the first time in 25 years, he realized exactly what he had thrown away. Over the following weeks, Michael became obsessed. He searched for every article, interview, and public appearance he could find. He watched videos online. He studied company reports. He learned that Noah's business was now worth millions. He learned that investors respected him. He learned that communities benefited from his charitable programs. The more Michael discovered, the more impossible it became to ignore one painful truth. The son he abandoned had become everything he himself had failed to become. Eventually, Michael made a decision. He would contact Noah. At first, he convinced himself his intentions were noble. He told himself he wanted closure. He told himself he wanted forgiveness. He told himself he simply wanted to know his son. But deep down, another reason existed. A reason he refused to admit. Michael was running out of money. Months earlier, one of his final investments had collapsed. Debt collectors were calling regularly. Retirement savings were nearly exhausted. The lifestyle he once enjoyed had vanished. And now, for the first time in his life, he needed help. One afternoon, I received an unexpected phone call. The number was unfamiliar. I almost ignored it. Almost. When I answered, a voice I hadn't heard in 25 years spoke my name. Emily! My entire body went rigid. For a moment, I genuinely thought I was imagining things. Then the voice repeated itself. It's Michael. Every painful memory returned instantly. The hospital room, the divorce papers, the empty birthdays, the years of silence. I gripped the phone tighter. What do you want? There was a long pause. I'd like to meet Noah. The request felt almost absurd. 25 years of absence. 25 years of silence. And suddenly he wanted a meeting. I laughed bitterly. You don't get to decide you're a father whenever it's convenient. Michael sighed. I know I made mistakes. Mistakes, I replied. Forgetting an anniversary is a mistake. Leaving your wife and newborn son isn't a mistake. It's a choice. Silence filled the line. Finally, he spoke again. Please, just ask him. When the call ended, I sat alone for nearly an hour staring at the wall. Part of me wanted to protect Noah from ever hearing his father's name again. Another part knew the decision wasn't mine. That evening, I told him everything. To my surprise, Noah didn't look shocked. He didn't even look angry. Instead, he quietly nodded. Then he said something that completely stunned me. Actually, Mom, I've known about him for years. I stared at him. What do you mean? Noah leaned back in his chair. When I was 22, I hired an investigator. The room suddenly felt very still. I found him a long time ago. My heart skipped a beat. You never told me. No, he replied calmly, because I needed to know something. What? Noah's expression became serious. I wanted to see if he would ever come looking for me. He paused. The sadness in his eyes was impossible to miss. He never did. For 25 years, Michael Reed had believed he was the one returning to find his son. What he didn't know was that his son had already found him years earlier. And Noah had learned far more about his father than Michael could possibly imagine. For the rest of that evening, I couldn't stop thinking about what Noah had told me. While I had spent years trying to protect him from the pain of his father's abandonment, he had quietly carried his own questions. Questions he had answered without ever telling me. The realization left me stunned. For years, I believed Michael Reed had completely disappeared from our lives. Yet somehow, Noah had found him long before Michael ever decided to return. The next morning, Noah arrived at my house carrying a thin black folder. He placed it on the kitchen table and sat down across from me. His expression was calm, but I could see something heavier behind his eyes. Slowly, he opened the folder. Inside were photographs, business records, public documents, and investigation reports. I hired a private investigator when I was 22, Noah said. I looked at the papers. Why? He thought for a moment before answering. Because I needed the truth. For years, Noah had accepted my explanations. He had accepted that his father made bad choices. But once he became an adult, those answers were no longer enough. He wanted facts. He wanted to understand how a man could walk away from his wife and child without looking back. The investigator found everything. Michael and Vanessa had married shortly after leaving the country. Their relationship, which Michael had once abandoned his family, lasted less than 12 years. Business failures, financial stress, and constant arguments eventually destroyed the marriage. After the divorce, Michael drifted between consulting jobs and struggling companies. The successful future he once chased never truly materialized. "I watched his life for years," Noah said quietly. I stared at him. "You watched him?" "Not constantly," he replied. "Just enough to know whether he ever tried to find us." The answer was obvious. He never had. No birthday cards, no letters, no attempts at contact. Nothing. For more than 2 decades, Michael Reed lived as though his son did not exist. The painful part wasn't what he had done. It was what he had never done. He had never even tried. A few days later, another unexpected development arrived. Noah received a call from a law firm located in Chicago. At first, he assumed it was related to business. Instead, the attorney requested a private meeting regarding a family matter. Curious, Noah agreed. 2 days later, we sat inside an elegant conference room overlooking downtown Chicago. Across the table sat an elderly attorney named Richard Wallace. Several folders rested neatly beside him. "Mr. Reed," the attorney began, "this matter concerns your grandfather." Noah frowned. "My grandfather," the attorney nodded. "William Reed." Neither of us had ever met him. Michael rarely spoke about his parents during our marriage, and after the divorce, all connections disappeared. The attorney opened one of the folders. "Your grandfather passed away 7 years ago." Noah exchanged a glance with me. "We hadn't even known." Richard continued. "Before his death, Mr. Reed established a family trust." The room suddenly felt very quiet. "A trust?" Noah asked. The attorney nodded. "Your grandfather became aware of your existence years after your father left the United States." I felt my heart begin to race. According to the attorney, William Reed had been horrified when he learned what his son had done. Attempts to locate us had failed because we had moved several times during Noah's childhood. Eventually, William instructed his legal team to establish a protected trust in Noah's name. The amount involved was substantial, several $1,000,000. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The number hardly seemed real. After years of struggling to pay rent, worrying about groceries, and stretching every dollar, hearing that kind of figure felt surreal. Then the attorney delivered the complication. "There is one condition." Of course there was. Noah leaned forward. "What condition?" Richard folded his hands. "The trust can only be fully transferred if both surviving direct heirs participate in the final legal authorization." My stomach dropped. "No," I whispered. The attorney nodded slowly. "Yes." Only one surviving direct heir remained besides Noah, Michael Reed. For the first time in 25 years, our lives were legally connected to the man who had abandoned us. When the meeting ended, we returned home carrying more questions than answers. That evening, Noah sat silently on the back porch as the sun disappeared below the horizon. "What are you thinking?" I asked. He stared across the yard. "I'm thinking life has a strange sense of humor." I couldn't disagree. After 25 years of absence, the man who wanted nothing to do with his son had suddenly become impossible to avoid. 3 days later, Michael called again. This time, Noah answered. The conversation lasted less than 5 minutes. I couldn't hear Michael's side, but I could hear Noah's. "Yes." Long pause. "No." Another pause. "I'm willing to meet." Pause. "1 meeting." Then Noah ended the call. "That's it?" I asked. He nodded. "That's it." "When?" "Saturday." The meeting was scheduled at a private restaurant in downtown Columbus. For the next several days, I worried constantly. No matter how successful Noah had become, no amount of money or achievement could completely erase the wound left by abandonment. Part of me feared Michael would somehow hurt him again. Saturday arrived. The restaurant occupied the top floor of a luxury hotel overlooking the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline. Soft piano music drifted through the dining room. Everything about the setting felt elegant and controlled, the exact opposite of the emotions hidden beneath the surface. Michael arrived first. When Noah entered, he immediately recognized him. The resemblance was undeniable. Same eyes, same posture, same jawline. For several seconds, neither man spoke. 25 years of absence stood silently between them. Finally, Michael rose from his chair. "Noah," my son nodded politely. "Michael." Not dad, not father, Michael. The distinction mattered. They sat down. A server poured water before quietly leaving. For several uncomfortable moments, silence filled the table. Then Michael spoke. "I've wanted this meeting for a long time." Noah didn't react. "Really?" Michael hesitated. "Yes," Noah calmly folded his hands. "Because according to my records, you knew where I was at least 3 different times over the years." Michael's face changed immediately. For the first time, genuine surprise appeared. "What?" "I hired an investigator years ago," Noah continued. "You weren't difficult to find." Michael looked stunned. Noah maintained eye contact. "You knew where I lived when I was 22. Silence. "You knew where I worked when I was 25. Silence. "You knew where my company headquarters were when I was 30. Michael's expression slowly collapsed. Every excuse he had prepared was suddenly useless, because Noah already knew the truth. The realization hung heavily between them, and for the first time since entering the restaurant, Michael seemed to understand that this meeting was not taking place on his terms. What he didn't realize was that Noah had uncovered something even more important, something connected to Michael's recent financial problems, something that explained exactly why he had suddenly decided to return after 25 years. And before the evening ended, that secret was about to be exposed. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything either man had said. Michael stared across the table at the son he had abandoned 25 years earlier, and for the first time in his life, he seemed unsure of himself. Throughout his career, he had negotiated business deals, managed employees, and talked his way through difficult situations. But none of those skills could help him now. Noah wasn't a stranger he needed to impress. He wasn't a client he needed to persuade. He was the child Michael had chosen to leave behind. For several moments, neither of them spoke. Finally, Michael cleared his throat. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness." Noah remained calm. "You're right." The answer wasn't angry. It wasn't cruel. If anything, it sounded honest. Michael looked down at the table. "I made mistakes." Noah slowly shook his head. "That's the second time someone in this family has called it a mistake." Michael looked confused. "My mother said you made bad decisions. You just called it a mistake. But abandoning your wife and newborn son isn't a mistake. It's a choice. A mistake is forgetting someone's birthday. A choice is leaving and never coming back." The words landed with brutal accuracy. Michael opened his mouth, then closed it again, because there was nothing to argue with. Noah continued. "For 25 years you had opportunities. 25 birthdays, 25 Christmases, 25 chances to pick up a phone. You didn't." Michael stared at the floor. The truth had nowhere left to hide. Then Noah reached into his briefcase and placed a folder on the table. Michael frowned. "What is this?" "Something I discovered while researching your life." A nervous expression crossed Michael's face. Slowly, he opened the folder. Inside were financial records, public court filings, business documents, and debt notices. The color immediately drained from his face. Noah watched quietly. "You lost most of your investments 3 years ago." Michael said nothing. "You sold your condominium 18 months ago." Silence. "You owe money to multiple creditors." More silence. "And your last company failed less than a year ago." Michael's hands began trembling. For the first time since arriving, he looked genuinely frightened. Noah leaned back. "You didn't come here because you missed me." Michael swallowed hard. "Noah, you came because you need something." The words cut through the room. Several nearby diners glanced toward the table before returning to their meals. Michael's shoulders sagged. The confidence he had entered with was completely gone. Noah wasn't finished. "Do you know what the saddest part is?" Michael looked up. "If you had called me 10 years ago, I might have believed you cared. If you had shown up 15 years ago, I might have given you a chance. But you waited until your life collapsed." Tears began forming in Michael's eyes. Real tears. The kind that arrive when denial finally disappears. For years, he had convinced himself he could return someday and fix everything. Now he understood the truth. Some things cannot be fixed. Some doors only close once. Then Noah revealed the final piece. "The attorney told me about Grandpa's trust." Michael froze. The reaction confirmed everything. You already knew about it, didn't you? Noah asked. Michael lowered his head. That was answer enough. Years earlier, Michael had learned about the inheritance his father left behind. He knew millions of dollars waited in a trust. He knew his son's signature was required to release it. And suddenly, his unexpected desire to reconnect made perfect sense. The meeting had never been about family. It had been about money. A painful silence settled between them. Finally, Michael spoke. I'm ashamed of myself. Noah nodded. You should be. The honesty hurt, but it was deserved. For the first time in his life, Michael had no excuses left. No one else to blame, no lies to hide behind, only consequences. Several minutes passed before Noah stood. The conversation was over. Michael looked up desperately. Please. Noah paused. Please what? A chance. The word sounded small, broken, almost childlike. Noah studied him carefully. Then he said something neither man would ever forget. When I was 6 years old, I used to sit by the window on my birthday hoping you'd show up. Michael closed his eyes. When I was 10, I wondered if you even remembered my name. A tear rolled down Michael's cheek. When I was 16, I found court records proving you never paid a single dollar to help raise me. The restaurant felt completely silent. And when I was 22, I hired an investigator because I wanted to know whether my father cared enough to find me. Michael could barely breathe. Noah's voice remained calm. You failed every test life gave you. Another tear slid down Michael's face. Then Noah delivered the sentence that finally shattered him. You didn't lose your son today. Michael looked up. You lost him 25 years ago. The words hit harder than any scream ever could. For a moment, Michael simply sat there. Broken, defeated, alone. The same loneliness he had forced upon others had finally returned to him. Noah picked up his briefcase. Then he walked away. He never looked back. Through the restaurant windows, the city lights glowed against the night sky. Outside, life continued moving forward just as it had on the day Michael left. Cars passed. People laughed. Families shared dinners. The world rarely stops for regret. Months later, the trust was legally transferred according to the provisions left by Noah's grandfather. Noah used a significant portion of the money to establish scholarship programs for single-parent families and disadvantaged students. He wanted opportunities for children whose lives had begun with obstacles they didn't create. The project expanded quickly. Within a few years, hundreds of students received assistance. Many became the first members of their families to attend college. Every success story reminded Noah why he had chosen that path. Pain could be inherited, but so could compassion. As for Michael, he disappeared from public life shortly afterward. No dramatic revenge followed, no public humiliation, no courtroom showdown, just consequences. The quiet kind that arrive when someone spends years running from responsibility only to discover there is nowhere left to run. One evening, several years later, Noah and I sat on the porch of the house he had given me. The sun was setting behind the trees, painting the sky with shades of gold and orange. We talked about ordinary things, work, friends, future plans, the kind of conversation families have when they genuinely enjoy one another's company. At one point, Noah smiled and asked me a question. Do you remember what he called me? I knew immediately. A burden, the word that had haunted me for decades. I nodded. Noah looked across the yard. Then he smiled. Turns out he was wrong. Tears filled my eyes, not because of sadness, because of victory. 25 years earlier, a selfish man had looked at a newborn child and seen a burden. What he failed to see was potential, character, strength, love, everything that truly mattered. In the end, Michael Reed spent his life chasing money, status, and freedom. Noah spent his life building relationships, purpose, and integrity. One man gained everything he thought he wanted and lost what mattered most. The other began with almost nothing and built a life richer than any inheritance could provide. And that, perhaps, was the greatest lesson of all. The people who abandon you do not decide your worth. What you become afterward does. And Noah became everything his father never believed he could be.